I'm about to talk about the most hidden element in Hearts of Iron 4 that no one likes to talk about. And technically, no one plays this. Not a single person has ever played this. And that is the 14th of August, 1939. The other scenario in Hoi 4. The one that nobody plays. 1939, boys. Look at the size of this fat Germany. So one thing you don't know about 1939 is that when they introduced the tank designer and the plane designer and the ship designer, yeah, that still exists, they also introduced models for 1939 of those specific designs that were invented after, well, between 1936 and 1939. So I thought I'd just show off some of the historical tanks and planes in this period and basically give you my thumbs up or thumbs down. Were these tanks, planes, and ships historically competent? Would they actually work well in Hearts of Iron 4? What a best place to begin than Germany. All right, here we go. Production. Okay, first of all, we have the Panzer 38T. It has a high velocity cannon, which is good for piercing and hard attack, so tank versus tank action. Two-man turret, decent. Radio, not a big fan of Radio 1, but it's decent. And it also has got smoke launchers on it as well, giving it a little bit of breakthrough and a little bit extra defense as well. Overall, 3 engine, 3 armor, gasoline engine, riveted armor to make it nice and cheap, and a Bogie suspension. Production cost of 6.6. Overall, if you want to make this tank better, we'd max out the amount of armor you've got on it. In this case, they've not gone for the next armor tech, so you could put at least 9 armor into this. Top it off as well, it's got high reliability as well. If you want to focus on encircling infantry, you probably focus on something that gives more soft attack overall. In this case, maybe autocannon is quite cost effective as well. Small cannon's decent for soft attack and hard attack, as well as piercing, but the improved small cannon is probably the best of both worlds when it comes down to cost effectiveness as well as the amount of firepower output. Skirted armor would be good if they'd researched it, but sloped armor is the only other option that only gives a very small increased amount of armor. So overall, if I was to modify and improve this tank, this is probably what I would go with. And top it off as well, why not an extra smoke launcher as well? We've still got an under 10 production tank here, and overall maybe welded armor and make it even better. Once again, when it comes down to tanks, I bet probably 10 production cost is probably the higher limit for like 1936 and 1939. This overall will be better when it comes down to piercing potential, armor, and breakthrough. At the end of the day, a tank is all about armor and breakthrough and the amount of damage you can deal with it. And overall, this would make an overall better tank. It's okay. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a thumbs down for me. Unfortunately, the Czech tank is not very good. What about the German designs? So we have the Panzer II August A. It has the autocannon, which is good for cost effectiveness. It has a 2-man turret, which is okay. Radio, what difference does the radio make? 3 breakthrough. It's not really worth it, to be honest. It's also got an interesting Christie suspension for speed. Riveted armor, you could go for welded, easy improvement. Only an extra 1 production cost is worth, and you can max out the armor as well. And 99 reliability is pretty good. One thing you notice with these German designs is that they are very, very reliable. Is this historical? I don't know, but the truth behind it is it's nice that you've got a tank that isn't going to break down every 2 minutes. German engineering at its best. Breakthrough and armor, maximizing those stats is for the win. It's okay. It's not the best. Next up, we have the medium tank. So the basic medium Panzer IV. We also got the Panzer III, which is relevant, which has got the exact same production cost, which is interesting. So we've got improved small cannon, really good mix of soft and hard attack and piercing. Piercing's the best point here. 3-man turret's really good. Radio is decent. Smoke launchers is pretty good. Torsion bar for extra reliability. Very reliable tank. Decent speed too. Welded armor, very advanced. And also gasoline engine. Could go for more armor too. Overall, sloped armor with skirts would be beneficial as well. How is the Panzer IV any different, though? That's the question. So the Panzer IV has the close support gun. If you ever see that tank in a lot of real-time strategy games, it's the one that's got a very, very short barrel and it fires an explosive shot. This is really good for soft attack. The only downside to it is it's got quite a high production cost compared to some of the others, which just improved small gun. Overall, very heavily armored, but the reliability takes a little bit of a dip. I think I like this design. I think it makes the most of the soft attack in 1939. And then we have the tractor. I don't know what the translation of this one is, but this is the 1939 one. Basically, the battleship land tank. It's got loads of soft attack. 37 soft attack. Has it got more soft attack than the Panzer IV? It does. But the production cost is like double. You never want to make this. It's very, very, very expensive. How much potential armor can you give it? You can give an extra 16 armor, an extra +4 breakthrough. You never want to make this. It's just way too expensive. Overall, it gives you some mad hardness. And I suppose if you want to produce a tank that doesn't require any chromium, this is the only one you're going to be able to do. If you were to reduce the cost, though, you could probably go from the automatic cannon or the improved autocannon. That brings the cost down too. I suppose you don't have to focus too much on speed because this is a slow tank. And then you can think about adding sloped armor as well as armor skirts. I won't even bother with the radio either because at the end of the day, you're not really getting that much breakthrough. But at 0.5 production cost and only getting 2.2 breakthrough, it's just really not worth it. Tanks are impressive. And let's look at the planes. So here we go. This is some interesting designs here. So we have the basic small airframe at 28 production costs. This is quite a cost-effective plane, and it has 2 light machine guns and 2 cannons. The way the current meta is at the moment is the cannons tend to be more effective at piercing air defense, so intercepting bombers, where the light machine guns and the heavy machine guns tend to be better off for dogfighting. Overall, it kind of lacks a lot of firepower and is nowhere near meta when it comes to dogfighting. It's got a decent engine though, Mark II. It's okay. It is very cheap, but I think this one, the BF110C, is going to be the winner. So it has 4 light machine guns, 2 cannons, and dual engine. No, this is way too expensive. This is not going to be very good. You guys know the meta. It's ×4 heavy machine guns. They don't have the research for it. It'd be ×2 heavy machine guns and the best single engine you could possibly get, whilst also getting armor. And they don't even have armor research as well. The BF109E, though, on the other hand, is practically the same. These are planes that are basically relatively cheap, but kind of effective at interception and also to a certain degree air superiority. But there's loads of ways you can modify this to make it a lot more effective. The 109D, the only difference between the D and the E is that the E has got cannons on it. And also the HE111 is another one as well, just standard bombs. This is the one you start the game with anyway. It's not really particularly a unique design. If you wanted to go meta, you would go for something like cannons and cannons. This would be a perfect interceptor to shoot down enemy bombers. And these would be really effective on interception missions. Fortunately, it exceeds the weight. So you'd have to do something like this to have the big enough engine. Truth is, because this is such an expensive aircraft, you need armor on this to make it cost effective. And otherwise, if you wanted to go for something that was dogfighting, you'd stack as many ×4 machine guns as possible, preferably heavy ones as well with armor. Anyway, next up, let's look at the United Kingdom. Oh my, the Cruiser 4. Look at this little boy here. So the doctrine of British tank design was very different compared to the rest of the world. They had this idea of a cruiser tank, which was a fast, lightly armored tank that would have a very powerful armament on it. In this case, you can see the improved small cannon. So this is a cruiser design. It was about speed, it was about hitting power, and less so about armor, which reflects on that. Riveted armor, low armor. So overall, pretty standard. If you wanted to make it more effective, you'd add more armor on, welded armor. I understand that my preference of tanks is not to have ones that have got lots of speed on them, but overall, if you want to maximize the amount of combat effectiveness, which I always think is the most important stat, you want to focus on armor and breakthrough. They're the most important too. And then when it comes down to Matildas, which is your heavy tank, so this was the second idea of a tank that the British had, the idea of a heavy, slow-moving infantry support tank. Surprisingly, this tank's speed is actually against the game rules. It's actually too slow to actually move, but you can actually make this at the very start of the game in 939, which is interesting. We've got lots of breakthrough. We've got an improved small cannon, which is really good for piercing and a mix between hard and soft attack. It's got cast armor. You wouldn't usually do this because this makes the cost of this tank go up massively. So if you go from cast armor and drop it down to riveted armor, it loses 10 production points. It goes from 27 production cost down to 18, which will make this tank so much more cost effective. However, I can't deny, look at the stats. Armor goes up massively with cast armor. Cast armor is only something I tend to do late game when I've got lots of production and I'm just upgrading the existing tanks built within my divisions. Overall, to be fair, apart from the cast armor, the rest of the tank is actually pretty damn good. Being it's a heavy tank, it tends to be a bit more on the heavier cost side, so you might be better off going for welded, riveted armor to bring the cost down, but you could always go for welded armor if you wanted to really stack out the amount of armor. Be aware that welded armor has been nerfed recently. It used to be plus 40% armor, now it's only 30%, which is something to be aware of. Overall, from a British design perspective, this is actually a pretty decent tank. This is something you'd see as a part of like a 40th division, but not used as the British doctrine whereby supported by infantry. All right, planes, boys. British planes, the East Submarine Spitfire. It's not a submarine, it's a plane. What the hell? And here we go, boys. We have actually a very close meta design. This kind of reflects the British superiority of planes during potentially the Battle of Britain. If you wanted to take this all the way to meta, you would add extra machine guns on. You'd also focus more on armor as well, but they don't have the armor tech unlocked. It's interesting to see, though. And overall, this will give you a massive trades against German planes. This will be so unbelievably powerful. Not only is it an improved design for airframe too, which gives bonuses to range and agility, but overall it has good combat character effectiveness as well as great agility. This is really interesting, guys. This is a maritime airframe. I bet most players don't even know this is even in the game. So this is a large airframe with a torpedo added onto it. So this is a super long range strategic bomber aircraft, but it is meant for spotting at sea or naval striking. I would not recommend naval striking with this because the cost of this, you see this 92 production cost, it's not worth losing. But overall, this will offer so much spotting potential. Or to be fair, actually, it'll be really good at hitting U-boats in the mid-Atlantic. The U-boats would think they were safe in that region. No, they wouldn't. In this case, they get some unbelievably awesome range to bomb them. It's got some insane air attack as well. It's like this plane can defend itself, but that production cost is insane. To be fair, I think the only time where this is going to be actually effective is if you were to take off a lot of the attack and try and limit its overall cost. Quad engine Mark 1 would still be enough weight if you removed all the extras. You need the flying boat though, just for the surface detection. Otherwise, it's not going to spot jack shit. So therefore, it'll not be able to do its strikes. USA. But the tanks aren't really that interesting because you understand America's involvement in the war was quite late. So their tank technology is slightly behind. The most advanced model they've got is the M2A2. Heavy machine gun as your main gun. One-man turret. Oh dear. An extra heavy machine gun turret. Oh dear. Basic radio, bogey riveted. Oh, this tank is awful. The biggest issue with this tank is it just will lack its ability to do soft attack damage. Secondary turret does half the damage of the tank. I just want to give a heads up that I don't think there's anything wrong with light tanks. It's just need to focus on the stats basically, and the doesn't have the technology for basic arm protection, so it can't have all the extras added, so it can't even have welded armor either. The only time you would use this tank is a part of a recon division, I would imagine. I think that's kind of the idea. Anyway, planes, here we go. So, the improved close air support airframe. So, this is a more advanced plane. Got access to 2 small bomb bays and heavy machine guns. Wow, this is actually a really decent cast. And they've added also an extra heavy machine gun. The only way you'd make this better is if you added a little bit of armor onto it. And therefore, it would be more of a meta cast design. It's pretty advanced compared to most planes in 1939, though. You also start off with the B-17 as well. Bombing potential, lots of AA attack, and also bomb sites as well. Interesting. There's not really much to say here. The American planes are not very interesting to look at just because, as you can see, most of these designs weren't even used in the war. They were updated designs that were added when they started to get more mobilized in 1940. Japan starts in a very interesting situation in 1939, as you can see. Let's look at the tanks. We'll have a look here. Medium tank, the basic medium chassis, has a close support gun. We have a 2-man turret, radio. This is basic suspension riveted. It's not very interesting. It's got over 100 reliability. Overall, you want to stack that armor as you normally would do and focus on getting as much armor out of this as possible. And we've also got the Hargo, the Type 95, which is unbelievably basic. 1-man turret, riveted armor. At the end of the day, I suppose you make the tanks based on where they're going to be used most effectively. And against China, I suppose then you don't really need expensive tanks, do you? I suppose you can upgrade them later on as well, which is interesting. Planes. So the Zero, I don't think he's even here. This kind of looks like the Zero, but I don't think it is. I'm going to look at the A5M here. So dual light machine guns. Once again, it'll work against China, but no one else. Overall, some of these designs are a little bit wacky, to be fair, because the basic small fighter plane is this one. It's a basic, and it's only got basic machine guns and a basic engine too. So a nation that's recently been revamped and changed is Italy. So I'm really curious to see if they've updated some of the designs. So the improved light tank chassis, 6.9 production cost, so it's quite low. It's got a high velocity gun on it. A fixed superstructure. Now this is not usually recommended because you lose breakthrough, and it's more of a defensive based tank. It's kind of a tank destroyer without being a tank destroyer, which is interesting. It's got a heavy machine gun as a secondary as well. And you can also sunbathe on the top too. Look, it's open. Wow. For the most part, the armor and breakthrough is dreadfully low. But the only thing this could do quite well is hard attack as well as piercing. If you were to improve this, you would get more armor on it. But isn't that standard? Is that the advice I give every single time? Where's the armor? Where's the armor? Next up, we have the basic light tank chassis. This is the older model, I guess. And it's pretty basic. I like the cost effectiveness of the auto gun, but everything else is pretty basic. Once again, armor and breakthrough is pretty pathetic. Planes. Improved small airframe here. Basic machine guns. Very basic. Interesting. Close air support with torpedoes too. It's basically a flying boat. And everything else too is mega basic. No really exceptional designs that jump out at me. Well, anyway, the big daddy, the one we've all been waiting for, the Soviet Union. Let's look at tanks to begin with. So the BT-7 is what you start with in 1936. So it's not really that advanced, really. It's got good piercing capabilities, nice hard and soft attack values, really focused on speed. So we've got Stirling, a Christie suspension, and max engine up to 10. So this is really focusing heavily on the speed. And welded armor. Wow, okay, so there's some decent armor on this. Of course, you know me. More armor, more. This is a decent design when it comes down to actual speed, though. That's pretty good. Next up, we have the KV-1. So this is one that actually saw action. The KV-1 here. Now, this is a very big boy for 1936-939. We have a 3-man turret, heavy tank design chassis, as well as a medium cannon. It's the first time we've seen a medium cannon. Torsion bar for the extra reliability, which is always nice. Welded armor, I approve. And a diesel engine too. Focusing heavily on speed as well as armor. Damn, this is actually a really good tank. This is actually probably one of the best designed tanks in 1936. I think you actually have this in 1936, don't you? No, regardless, anyway, it's a basic tank chassis. And it's a really, really good design. Last, but definitely not least, France. Now, I've left France till last because France is very interesting because remember, everyone repeats the same line that the French tanks were more advanced than the Germans at the end of, well, the start of the war. Let's actually see how accurate that information was. When it comes down to planes, we have improved close air support again. Interesting mixture between a plane that does a lot. I'd really not recommend this kind of plane though because it's got a high production cost and it tries to do everything. It's an interceptor for bombers. It's for dogfighting machine guns. It's also just some cast support. It's basically a plane that tries to do everything. You tend to find that these planes tend to be the least effective overall. Overall, it's a decent plane, but overall, multi-role planes don't do very well. Medium bomber here, bit bare bones, but it does some air attack, which I suppose is pretty good, I guess. It's interesting you can add machine guns on here, giving air attack, but also you can add on turrets as well, giving air attack. So you've got to decide what's the most effective, I suppose. All right, lads, the French tanks. Here we go. So we've got the light chassis 2, which is the most advanced chassis in 1936. And we have decent small cannon, which is really great for soft attack, as well as piercing capabilities. Surprisingly, though, you could go for the improved light cannon as well. Why have they not gone for that? Single man turret, not really good for the breakthrough, but I suppose if you focus on defensive. Out of all of the basic stuff that this has got, it's got sloped armor, which is kind of a more advanced thing. How much extra armor is this giving? About an extra 4 armor. That's decent. Also welded armor too. And overall, one of those slow tanks that focus mainly on the defensive. I suppose it's a decent design to say how advanced it is. Next up, we have the AMC-35, 9 production cost. So this is a 1936 tank. It's got improved small cannons, which good capabilities in piercing. 2-man turret's decent. But overall, that's pretty much it. Very slow. Kind of reliable. But once again, the traditional thing that everyone's going to mention is this doesn't have radio on. They also have the Shah B1 BIS. This is a heavier boy. Basic tank, 1936. Look at the size of the barrel on that baby. Ooh. This has a medium howitzer. This is a very heavy gun, but has a very high production cost with it as well. And it has a heavy, thick superstructure, which is, he leans more to more of a defensive tank overall. Low on the breakthrough, high on the armor, high on the soft attack. It has a radio though, and it also has an additional small cannon. We have a land battleship, boys, with an extra cannon. Riveted armor though. Overall, it's basically a tank that deals damage. That's kind of the idea. It kind of maybe leans a little bit more to the defensive because the breakthrough isn't very good. I thought it was really interesting to include this, guys, because I think the devs spend a lot of time on the 1939 start, and for the most part, so many few people play it. We know the stats, okay? 1 in 10 games is a 1939 one, which is very low, but it's nice to appreciate some of the extra things that they have to add to 1939 when they introduce new expansions. And there's examples of some of the designs that are in the game that are all kind of historically based designs, which I thought was kind of cool. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to check out more Hoi 4 content, give this video a try here. This one. Go on. This video is the one.